Anyone who has ever visited the beaches along the east coast of the United States of America has probably seen horseshoe crabs. But their name is very misleading because the animals are more closely related to spiders and scorpions than crabs. And that is not the only mystery that is surrounding them. Horseshoe crabs have been around for about 300 million years, long before we came along. Every year between May and June, millions of them gather along the beaches of Eastern and Central America to mate. Females are quite a bit larger than males. The females full with eggs head towards the shore and the males wait for them in the surf line. Together they head towards the beach, or rather the female drags the male up onto the beach where she lays her eggs in the sand. The female lays about 80,000 eggs, but takes several trips to do so. So-called satellite males want in on the action, and many females drag 3 to 4 males around with them, quite a heavy burden. As a matter of fact, those satellite males are quite successful and do end up fertilizing a portion of her eggs. I have traveled to New Hampshire to meet up with Professor Wynne Watson, one of the leading scientists for horseshoe crabs. We are attaching a critter cam to the carapace of the horseshoe crab, which is quite cooperative at the moment. Professor Watson wants to find out more about how they find their mate. Horseshoe crabs have 9 different eyes in addition to photoreceptors on their tail that make up quite a sophisticated light-sensing system. They do see shapes, differences in light, and they also have one set of eyes that can see ultraviolet light.
Yes, there we go.
Wow.
We're ready to go and test the critter cam in the bay. Of course, the camera is attached to a cable because we don't want to lose it, and also want to retrieve it again once Professor Watson has gathered enough data. Off you go. The animal doesn't seem to be bothered much by the critter cam. And here we see our little cameraman immediately chasing after another horseshoe crab. But is this what they see? Probably not. Their 2 compound eyes each consist of 1,000 separate photoreceptor cells from which their brains create an image, not unlike insect eyes. Horseshoe crabs are true living fossils and extremely adaptable. The largest population lives in the Delaware Bay, but there are also 3 different species that live in the Indo-Pacific. It is believed that adult horseshoe crabs spend most of their lives dug in the mud in depth ranging from 90 to possibly over 600 feet on top of the continental shelf, way out in the Atlantic Ocean. Quite an amazing feat for such a cumbersome traveler. Horseshoe crabs prefer to feed on what they find on the seafloor, such as worms, mollusks, but also crustaceans and small fishes. They use their legs for walking, some swimming, but also to move food towards their mouth opening. In order to get good shots of the horseshoe crabs along the shoreline, I had to let myself get pummeled by the waves. Not always a glamorous job, let me tell you. It seems that the horseshoe crabs suffer the same fate as me in the surf. It is hard for the animal to turn themselves around once they are flipped on their backs on dry land. Especially when there is a male hanging on to the female's tail as well. That takes quite a bit of effort, and many of them will not make it before the tide goes down again. Horseshoe crabs spawn during high tides and prefer full moons. That's why mass spawning usually happens at night, but it is not unusual to see them during the day.
spawning horseshoe crabs as far as the eye can see. Also a feast for shorebirds that feed on horseshoe crabs' eggs. Not just birds profit from the spawning activities, also fishes, shrimp, and crabs that live close to shore. In order to grow, horseshoe crabs have to mold out of their shell. Once sexual maturity is reached, they will no longer mold and their shells become ideal spots for other organisms to grow on. So this fuzzy one in the front is probably quite a bit older. Horseshoe crabs are believed to live up to 20 years. This female is taken off with the younger suitor and his unblemished shell. And this one has decided to go with a more experienced gentleman, but also has to carry an extra load. Once she's ready to lay her eggs, she will dig a hole in the sand, with the male still attached to her. As she is laying her eggs, he fertilizes them. Once they're done, she closes up the hole with sand. Horseshoe crabs will either spawn in shallow water or on the beach in the intertidal zone, that is underwater during high tide and out of the water during low tide. Horseshoe crabs play a very important role in the yearly red-knot bird migration. Approximately 1 million birds will come through the Delaware Bay in the next several weeks in order to feed on the horseshoe crab's eggs. The famished birds use this bay as their halfway stop between South America and the Canadian Arctic, where they spend their summers to breed. The red-knots will feast on as many eggs and small crustaceans as they can in order to gain as much weight to survive the total flight of over 9,000 miles from south to north. The red-knot migration is considered to be one of the longest migrations in the entire animal kingdom. No wonder they're so hungry. And of course, seagulls and other shorebirds join in on the feast. Despite this massive predation, it is not the birds that have the greatest impact on horseshoe crab mortality. It is human activity. Horseshoe crabs are caught as bycatch, harvested to use in the biomedical industry, and also used as bait. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out the other films as well. And remember, always keep your fins wet.